You all doing today? My name is Jordan McCracken-Foster, and I'm a teaching artist here at Art Prof. And I'm here today with Art Prof Clara Lieu. And today, what we're going to be discussing is the difference between plagiarism and inspiration. And for those of you who want to strengthen your artistic weaknesses, you definitely should check out our website, artprof.org, where we have lots of free content, tutorials, and critiques, and to help you grow as an artist. So, Clara, what are we looking at today?
We are looking at an illustration that Andy Warhol did for Vanity Fair. He was commissioned to do that in 1984. And this is actually a real lawsuit that happened. And basically, if you guys don't know who Andy Warhol is, you can watch our Crit Clash video. Lynn Goldsmith was a photographer who took this photograph of Prince, and Andy Warhol created this illustration for Vanity Fair and used Lynn Goldsmith's photograph as a reference. So I'm not going to tell you guys how the lawsuit came out. You can look it up later. But we're going to just look at these two images on their own without any of the historical context. Jordan, what do you think this is? Is this plagiarism? Is this inspiration?
I mean, the reference is the artwork is very clear about how strongly the reference is like inspiring it. And so, like, depending on how you see that lawsuit going, I mean, I could see how someone could say it's plagiarism, but personally, I would say more inspiration based on just the creativity behind the piece. There's definitely a significant amount of changes that are being made, even though it's still using the same photo.
And tell us in the chat, you guys, do you think this is plagiarism or inspiration? And honestly, a lot of the times it's not that clear. And so you can tell us in the chat if you're like a little bit on the fence, maybe veering more towards this, because we're going to look at a lot of cases today where you're sort of a little bit suspicious, even though you pretty much think it's in one camp or the other. I'm going to agree with you, Jordan, and I'm going to say I think it's also inspiration, because I feel like when I look at Andy Warhol's illustration, it has a really different mood to it. A lot of it has to do with the color, but a lot of it's also the articulation of the facial features. If you look at Lynn Goldsmith's photograph, the facial features are not really that strong in contrast. Like, in fact, his whole facial hair and his mouth, they're really light and low in contrast, but in Andy Warhol's, it becomes very dramatic. I don't know, like, how did you decide, Jordan, that these really are different enough to not be called plagiarism?
Well, a lot of it just has to do with the use of the photo. I feel like if I can say, oh, I recognize that photo, like without them being side by side, then that would make me lean towards plagiarism a little bit more. But the thing with Andy Warhol, despite what I said in the Crit Clash, you know, he always puts a couple of his own unique twists to it, and I think that's the thing that a lot of people will appreciate and want to separate. So, like you mentioned, the colors, the line quality, the adding of some of the features, and of course, you're doing an illustration of Prince. You can't get away from certain things. He looks how he looks. So, yeah.
Cerulean is asking, Lynn Goldsmith is a professional photographer. Does that make a difference? It doesn't matter. I mean, you could be somebody who just posted this picture of Prince on Instagram. Maybe you never took a photo in your life, and it could still be considered. So yeah, the professional part doesn't matter really in terms of the copyright. Seven Angelic says it's tough. I can argue both sides really. And David Pena is saying, is this even an illustration? I'm confused. Well, do you want to dig into that a little bit, Jordan? Because we've talked about this in the past, like, what's the line between illustration and fine art? We're not going to get to that right now. But is this an illustration for you from what we've talked about?
Yeah, I could say it's an illustration. There's enough of a creative push for me to say it's an illustration, but there's definitely a heavy sense of realism. Like, it's not something that I imagine he would sketch out and, you know, figure out, like, you know, and take the exact same process as I would maybe to approach it if someone said, I want you to paint or draw Prince. So yeah, I would say that fits in there in that bucket.
Well, I would say it's an illustration just because of the way the image came about, which is that Vanity Fair commissioned it from Andy Warhol for the purposes to accompany an article. That alone makes it an illustration from a technical definition. Dan is saying this illustration is using the photo without authority. Why are you guys supporting this? Well, here's the piece of the story that I didn't tell you guys, and you can look this up and read about it more later. Actually, Vanity Fair asked Lynn Goldsmith for permission specifically to use her photograph for another artist as a reference photo to create an illustration, and they paid her for it. Lynn Goldsmith ended up suing the Warhol Foundation later, but she was paid and she did get a photo credit. The one thing that did stick out to me is they didn't tell her who the illustrator was. So she had no idea it was going to be Andy Warhol. But even that's not the end of the world. So you guys can think about what that really means. It definitely does make things very, very different. Okay, let's take a look at another comparison. So this is Barbara Hepworth, who is a sculptor. And we also have Henry Moore. And they really worked around the same time period. So in some ways, you can sort of see that there would be some similarities. Oftentimes, artists do really pull from each other. And we have a sculpture by Henry Moore at the top. And we have another one by Barbara Hepworth at the bottom. So what is this to you, Jordan? Remember, they're almost the same age.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would also say that this one's more inspiration. The reason I say that is just because it's not like the only things that are really similar to me are like the way they're using their shapes and the fact that it's a sculpture. The color's different. It has a different overall composition, and I could totally see the influence, but I don't think I would look and say you totally it's sort of like that meme where someone's like, hey, can I cheat off your homework? And it's like, yeah, just change the answers a bit so the teacher doesn't notice. I don't get that vibe with this one.
It's hard for me because they do have a similar flow. Mm-hmm. Because I think the thing about Henry Moore to understand is that he's all about amorphous organic forms. So is Barbara Hepworth. I mean, they both have a similar aesthetic, and they both look like reclining figures to me, even though they're very abstract. They feel like the same pose. But I think I'm going to agree with you that it seems like two artists who are grappling with similar themes. They have images that could definitely be seen as similar. And especially because I know that they were working at the same time period and knew each other. That makes me think even more that it's probably inspiration, because oftentimes these plagiarism cases, the artists don't know each other at all. So I don't know. Do you feel like that matters?
I feel like it would. And you know, the way I kind of think about it is if this were a different medium that I was even more familiar with, like say drawing or painting or even concept art or something like that, and I saw two paintings of a waterfall and a town living by it, you know, you could say it's a very similar subject and it's even the same, a similar type of way of communicating, but I couldn't necessarily call that plagiarism. And I imagine in the mind of someone who's well adept in the history of sculpture and things like that, that this would probably fall in the same bracket. As far as knowing each other, yeah, there's no way you can hide things from your friends like that. Like, it's just kind of like, really, dude? They would knock on your door, you come to you and say, like, really? Come on, man. I know you stole that. You can't put that up. Yeah.
Neil is saying, I think it's more like they belong in the same art genre. Okay, that's a really different, I think, way to look at the work. So really good comment there. And we also have a comment from Emily, who says inspiration, especially as the methods and inspiration of their pieces are different. And this is a good comment from Cerulean, who says reclining woman is a classic body position many artists have used. Yep, I mean, I'm sure you guys have heard before this thing that, oh, nothing is new. Everything has been done before in visual art and music and everything. And so oftentimes when you take a classic pose, it's hard to argue plagiarism. Simple Triskel says, depending on the artist, the price might differ. I heard about a similar issue with voice actors. If the person hiring makes boatloads of money, it could seem like taking advantage. And this is another thing, Jordan, we've talked about. You can't plagiarize a style. Do you agree with that or disagree?
Yeah, as someone who tries to be a style chameleon of sorts as a concept artist, I definitely think you can. I mean, plagiarizing a style is almost, I don't want to say ridiculous, but it's almost necessary in some situations. To say I own this style, I own this color blue, I own this, line weight type, or it's just like, really, how pretentious can you be? I don't fully grasp that concept. So yeah.
Well, this is a good comparison from Dan. Grunge Seattle Sound, Pearl Jam versus Stone Temple Pilots. Yeah. So you will oftentimes see clusters of artists who work together. They have similar things, but do retain their own voice. Fayruz says, will there be a mention of the Inktober controversy today? It was regarding plagiarism. Well, we're not going to talk about that one today because it's not in our slideshow. I don't think we're going to comment on it because I have not done the research and I don't feel that I've seen enough to make something that I feel I can stand by. So we're not going to be discussing that today. Okay. And by the way, if you guys want to exercise your organic form sculpture needs, we've got you covered with our balsa wood carving tutorial. Okay. Let's take a look at this one. And again, this one was in the news. And I'm not going to tell you guys the backstory. If you want to know, the link is in the video description below. It's a WBUR article. But Jordan, let's look at these two. The one on the left is a mural that was created by these two artists, Richard Gomez and Thomas Burns. And the one on the right is a mural that was in a liquor store. So what do you think? Plagiarism, inspiration, which one is it?
Yeah, this one feels more like plagiarism to me. The reasons for it, I would say, are one, just the phrase Roxbury love. Two, the background is the exact same with the red, yellow, and green triangles. And the only things that are really different is you take down Nelson Mandela and put up a Heineken bottle. Like that's really it. And obviously changing the format from a huge, panorama / landscape to this little square. But it feels like the exact same thing. If it wasn't Heineken, I almost could think it's the same painters.
Well, one thing that I sometimes do when I'm trying to figure out, okay, is this inspiration, is this plagiarism, is I put myself from the point of view of the artist. So I think about, okay, what if I was Richard Gomez and Thomas Burns? How would I feel if I came into this liquor store and I saw this mural? What type of effect would that have? I'm like, this is totally plagiarism. And you know what makes me really mad? Really? You're going to replace Nelson Mandela with a Heineken? Like, I don't know. I would be livid if I were the artist. Because, I don't know, for me, you could argue, oh, Roxbury love, that's not a new phrase. Nobody owns that phrase, at least not that I know of. I don't think it's trademarked or anything like that. But it's like they took the exact same font. It's like, really, you can't just change the font? Like, maybe that would have been the difference. What do you think?
Right. Yeah. I mean, there's nothing wrong. Like, I feel like where inspiration could be used, if they had used triangles in their background, that's fine. They can even have them similar colors, but the fact that it's like the exact same layout, like you said, the exact same font, the only difference is like the stuff I mentioned earlier. It's just, it feels lazy. I think that's the thing. It just feels absolutely lazy. And for Heineken, for their ad, Nelson Mandela wasn't necessarily fitting their brand. So they said, let's put our own bottle on it. And they just leave it there and put it up on a wall. And so that, yeah, if I were the artist, I would be completely livid. I would be very upset.
I mean, the whole thing about being able to reference and mine from other people's visuals is, in theory, you have to alter it enough that it becomes your image. Now, where that line is never clear. And by the way, you guys, we do have a lawyer who is coming on the stream. I believe it's next Sunday, and he is going to give bona fide legal advice. So you guys should definitely show up for that. But I think the thing is, it's like, yeah, like Emily's saying, plagiarism, they even kept the font. And Neil is saying, but the composition is different. What do you think about that, Jordan? Because it's not the same. I mean, if we go back, and we look at the composition, the mural's like really, really horizontal. The composition in the liquor store is a square. Is that enough, or does the other stuff override?
To be honest, I think that it's obvious enough that they took enough from this that you could say that there's a lot of inspiration. I think the reason that they're different is simply a matter of space, really, because the first image is it's meant to be a huge mural that goes across who knows how many feet. And then you have this ad, maybe they didn't have the space. Clearly it looks like a cramped area, and said, let's just put it into a square, but keep the background, keep the font, keep it so again, no one owns triangles. No one owns the color yellow, as far as I know. If they are, they're probably super rich. And, all those things combined really doesn't make much of a difference. It's as if they just cropped the sides to me.
That's a good point. It didn't even occur to me that maybe it's a practical reason that the Heineken version is a square, that they were like, okay, fill this wall, put something in there. And they said, oh, doesn't fit. I guess I need to change that. And this is interesting, too. Blue Will Spirit says, did Heineken vet or approve this? I would think their lawyers would know better. And David is saying, not at all the brand. The art is commissioned by the brand, I'd say. We don't know. I mean, you guys should read the WBUR article and see if they have things that are a little bit more specific. But yeah, it's hard to know, like, who to blame, because sometimes an artist is told, do this, and then they just get paid for the gig. So it's tricky. Dolan says things were copied. I can't imagine that someone stood in front of it and had an idea and inspiration by looking at it. And Mie is saying these ones are both funny and infuriating because the train of thought behind them is usually, oh, but Nelson Mandela is iconic, but Heineken is also iconic, right? Totally the same. Yeah, not really. I don't think so. All right. Well, let's take a look at another example. And just to contextualize for you who the artists are, this is William Steig. And William Steig is a brilliant illustrator. He published tons of children's books. He did Sylvester and the Magic Pebble. He did Dr. DeSoto, Rotten Island, and even the original Shrek. Tell me in the chat if you guys knew William Steig, because I feel like his work is known, but maybe his name is not as well known. He also did illustrations for The New Yorker. And we're also going to look at Quentin Blake. Probably you guys know he did like all the illustrations for the Roald Dahl books. And they do have somewhat similar qualities. So we're going to look at these two pieces. We have an illustration by Steig at the top and Blake at the bottom. What do you think, Jordan?
This is the tricky one. The styles are almost too distracting in some ways. I know we literally just talked about not plagiarizing a style or in everything, but it's so similar that it almost throws off my own thoughts about it. I think that the pieces aside from that are very different. It just, with William Steig's piece, it seems like, just she's walking and doing this little transition, whereas the other one is just, placing almost like I want to say like a wanted photo, but that's how it kind of feels to me. It just showing this metamorphosis. So similar concept. I don't know. It's blurring the line between plagiarism and inspiration for me, to be honest with you.
Well, let me just explain the context. So the image at the bottom, if you guys have ever read The Twits, which you should, it's such a, did you ever read that book, Jordan, when you were a kid?
I've never even heard of it.
Okay, so The Twits, they're basically this horrible, disgusting couple that's mean and does gross things. So, Roald Dahl's so good at explaining things. He talks about how Mr. Twit would be so disgusting that he would leave old food stuck in his beard. And when he was hungry, he would like lick it and eat it. It's so disgusting. And so this illustration is talking about how when somebody is a mean person and behaves badly, it makes them uglier and uglier and uglier. So he's trying to illustrate a very particular transformation of the person. So my first argument would be, hey, Quentin Blake was given this storyline to illustrate. So this is not new, this idea of showing a transformation. I'm going to say it's inspiration. But I could see why people might, I don't know. Are you clear cut, Jordan, or are you a little on the fence?
I think the only reason I'd be on the fence is because the styles happen to be very similar and they happen to be similar subject matter. If it was a completely different style, then I would just be like, oh, inspiration, totally. But that's where the thing fits in, because someone could make the argument that the styles are so similar that all they did was change the viewpoint and add a full body instead of cutting off at the chest. So, I could see both sides. It's very fuzzy for me. I would lean towards inspiration, but it feels kind of like I'm rooting for Darth Vader at the same time. It's like, it's a little weird. So
yeah. A little tinge of discomfort for me, but mostly I feel that it gets overridden, but it could just be I have such regard for these two illustrators, and maybe that's not fair, because I think the art should stand for itself, and maybe we shouldn't be saying, I love William Steig, therefore I would never believe he would do something like that. So it's a little bit tricky, because that brings up, again, what we've talked about is, do you separate the art from the artist? Can we just look at this as a standalone case? Right. Moses is saying, I feel both of them are very strong in their gestural technique, side by side, almost like a battle. Who gets it? Oh, yeah, this is great. Victor has a better explanation than me. It's about how people with ugly spirits grow ugly. Although you, Rye World, says, well, it's like me and my mother when I do a mistake. And Moonbeam has a good question. Are we even sure they're related at all? It could not even be inspiration, because I feel like this kind of image is so common. Well, what do we think about that, Jordan? Because somebody mentioned earlier a reclining nude figure, not new. What do you think about this?
That just makes the whole conversation even more complicated, because then you have to think back to, it's not just these two artists anymore, it's generations of seeing this particular type of image being done, of a transformation or a metamorphosis. And who owns that? Who was the first to do that? Is that even something you can say is unique? So yeah, there's a whole lot of conversations, and I don't know if we'll be able to cover the entire thing in a 30-minute stream, but yeah, that's tough. That's tough.
Yeah, and our intent here is not to label things as, this is plagiarism, this is inspiration. I think it's more putting the ideas out there and getting you guys to think and be aware of some of the factors. We're not by any chance trying to be the word. I like this comment from Nicoletta, who says, how about the similarity in features of the characters if the haircut and the nose were different? Yeah, you just wonder, like, what is the one thing that would tip you over the edge? And Seven Angelic says, but the Twits illustration is being dictated by the Roald Dahl story. It is, but you could certainly say, oh, I was told to illustrate this. Hey, that William Steig image, that kind of fits, right? I mean, that is very, very tricky. Okay, let's look at another one. This is by a contemporary artist, Richard Prince. This is a project he did in 2015. It's called New Portraits. And it showed at the Gagosian Gallery, which is the top of the art world. It's like the biggest commercial art gallery in the world, basically. And these are actually Instagram posts by other people that Richard Prince then printed out. And he said that his method of alteration was adding a comment to each of these posts. So if you guys look up close, you will see him adding these comments, but the comments are gibberish. Like, they don't make any sense. So this one on the right-hand side, Richard Prince's comment is, told it on a mountain with Mr. Jimmy. And on the left, it says, just to be dare ID quiet, I'm sure you not shmoo friend. That's his comment. So what is this? Plagiarism? Inspiration? And by the way, it sold for over $100,000 at an art fair, just so you know.
Before I say what I think, I am going to pretend for a minute that one of my photos was up there and it sold for $100 million. If I found that out, I would find his address, knock on his door and be like, bro, where's my money? Like, that's the kind of emotion I get, because it's so clear. Adding a comment is not enough. you know, that would be like me saying, if I comment on some artist's work that I appreciate on Instagram, that I suddenly have the right to print, you know, screenshot that and print it on a t-shirt or on a book and make money off of it. I think it's ridiculous. And I think it's the epitome of laziness, personally.
This makes me furious because actually it's a really good comment from Seven Angelic, who says not just plagiarism, but a violation of privacy. Absolutely. I mean, did any of these people get asked if their images could be printed out and sold at an international art fair? There's so many problems I have with this piece that I don't even know where to begin. And then the fact that people are holding this up as $100,000 worth of artwork. I mean, don't you feel like this is the emperor's new clothes?
Oh, totally. There are so, you know how many people you could feed with $100,000 or like, you know, like just the audacity that this individual would have to do this without giving permission of the other photographers. It'd be one thing if he took his own photos or did his own artwork and made the exact same format, and he can even still have the gibberish comment. But the fact that these are real people that he did not get permission from, that just, it's frustrating. And I imagine that 99% of the people who are in these photos don't even realize that this happened to them.
Well, you guys can definitely read up on this particular case. I don't think there was a lawsuit, but I definitely think a lot of people were mad because the issue here is that the people depicted in the images, they're just people on Instagram. I mean, how many of them have the financial means to sue him for this? It's very, very unlikely. And he's a very powerful artist in the art world. I mean, he's like a top tier person who's, if he's showing at Gagosian for sure. And here's another thing that Moonbeam brings up. He probably didn't even ask the original creators. And then there was this other argument I read in an article. People said, oh, well, they should be flattered that he recognized their work and brought international attention to those photos. And some of these people were actually very happy that they did it because they wanted the exposure. What do you say to that, Jordan?
That's dumb. I can't really put it any other way. Just, I mean, some of these people I'm sure didn't really even want that. They just wanted to post something for their friends because they thought they looked cute, or they wanted to show something they were doing that day, or show the lunch that they were having, or whatever. And yeah, I think that's idiotic, personally.
I am glad to hear this comment from Cerulean, Devil's Advocate. Always great to hear that point of view. I think the context is different, not just alteration. They could convey a different message because they're curated, not plagiarized. Well, that's true. I mean, seeing something on Instagram on your phone in a casual place, it's very different than putting it in an international art fair in a major white cube gallery. The context is very different. So maybe that alone shifts and alters the imagery. I'm not really sure. Although Blue Little Spirit says this is up there with the duct tape banana. Moses says, I feel if he agrees to use the photo with the users, this is not plagiarism by any stretch. At best, it is performance art. And CCH says that seems so rude. On the other hand, trying to track stuff like that seems like a full-time job, which I would not want to do. And Riam says, should it even be considered as art? What do you think, Jordan? Is this art?
I would not put it in my personal definition of art. To me, it feels like a screenshot of something someone else did. That, you know, it. I'm trying to calm down. I would not consider it art. No, I don't think that it's what I would consider original enough for or well thought out enough to be placed in that category. It just feels like stealing to me, to be honest.
I mean, this is the type of thing that makes me like ashamed to be an artist. I feel like I want to apologize to the world that this is considered art. Like, it just feels like an insult. But then you'll have a whole group of people who say, oh, but that was the message, that he's playing with you. And oh my God, we could talk about this forever and ever and ever, but that's something to consider. Maddie B says, first glance, definitely plagiarism. Then I wondered if the gibberish nature of the comment was somehow the point of it, some hidden meaning, but then I was like, nah. All right, let's take a look at another comparison. This is Jenny Saville. She is a British contemporary artist. She does these monumental oil paintings of human figures. She's a phenomenal artist. You guys should check out her work. And then we also have Claude Cahun, who is a photographer, and their work really was exploring gender identity and sexuality. So we're going to look at these two cases, which is a photo by Claude Cahun. Claude Cahun's very different time period. Claude Cahun was like early 20th century. Jenny Saville was born in 1970, and so she's very much active and working today. So Jordan, what do you think about this comparison?
I would say it's closer to inspiration. The subject matter is very much the same, you know, two heads, and but the way that it's painted, the composition, even the mood of it feels very different. Like the image by Cahun feels very dark and ominous almost, and in fact that's in black and white. Whereas the painting, it feels much more lively, and I don't want to say innocent per se, but there's something about it that feels youthful. So I would say it's more inspiration personally.
And I think this goes back to that argument that, come on, we've seen images with two heads before. I mean, go back to Greek mythology. Isn't there a god named Janus or something, and he's got like two heads? I mean, it's not arranged the same, but this idea of duality, it's so common, right?
I would say so. Yeah, this isn't the first time it's been done at all.
I don't know. And I also feel like we've talked about bad cliches, and there's always somebody in high school who wants to do a portrait of how I really feel that I'm in conflict with myself. And it's always two heads that are together. So I feel like that is not new. But also, I feel like the interaction is different between the two heads. Mm-hmm. Because the Cahun image, the face on the left is like glaring at the other one. But the Jenny Saville image, the heads look like they don't even know the other one is there. What do you think about the interaction?
Yeah, so sure, in Cahun's image, it actually kind of reminds me of that image of having a devil and an angel on the shoulder, and it feels like the head on the right is almost tempting the person, like whispering in his ear, like, "Hey, you should do that," and going like, "Excuse me." Like that's just kind of the story I put together in my head. That's my my thing. But the one on the right, it just feels like I said, it feels innocent. It feels like they're. I like how you said that it feels like they're not even aware that the other's there. I don't know if I would go that far, but they definitely feel friendly. Like they feel like there's like they're almost like cuddling up next to each other almost is kind of the vibe I'm getting.
Well, and I do know that Jenny Saville does work from photographs a lot, and a lot of them are historical photos. And so I wonder where she got this one from. I mean, I think another theme you can bring up is conjoined twins. And I think there is a set of conjoined twins that does have this arrangement. I feel like I read something about it in Life magazine. But anyway, I know that she does that a lot, but also like the time period is so different, and the mood, again, the color scheme, like somebody said up here, is Saville the one about conjoined twins? Cahun is one about two different people. Well, that's interesting. So maybe some people look at the Saville one as literally physically attached, but the Cahun one is a metaphorical representation of one person? Did I say that right?
That's how I saw it personally, actually. Like like even looking at the Cahun photo, you could see the shoulder of the character on the right as it kind of goes towards the center of the piece, whereas the Saville's painting, it feels more like they're conjoined twins. Like you could argue that maybe, you know, she's going like this and the other girl's like sticking her head over her shoulder like that, but they feel a little bit more close together. If you know, they feel like more like conjoined.
I like this comment from Michael, who says there's an uncomfortableness in the Saville painting. To a certain degree, there is too with the Cahun image, that there's almost a questioning that's going on, which I would guess would go to the theme of gender identity that Claude Cahun explored quite a bit, but it's a different type of discomfort. So I'm going to go with inspiration. I mean, I think they're both very compelling pieces, but for different reasons. They're not relying on the same visuals or story to tell the idea. Okay, so now we're going to look at Rembrandt, and I think you guys, I hope you know who Rembrandt is. Hey, Jordan, did you know that there's Rembrandt toothpaste?
What?
Yeah, you can buy Rembrandt toothpaste as a brand.
What does it even taste like? That sounds so weird.
I don't know. Maybe it's amazing. Maybe it unleashes your creative expression. I have no idea. Anyway, we also have Odd Nerdrum, who's a contemporary artist, and he does these bizarre surrealistic scenes, and his style is fairly similar to Rembrandt. I mean, it's hard to imagine that Odd Nerdrum has not looked at, I mean, who has not looked at Rembrandt, who's an artist? But what do you think, Jordan, this comparison?
It's funny because like this one feels like Rembrandt, but the last piece that you showed with all the characters lying down, yeah, this one, it feels like Salvador Dali in a way. Like there's something about that. But to me, it doesn't feel like he's getting the same magic that the other artists are able to capture. And so that portrait where we're comparing Rembrandt and his, you know, the style is similar, but it just feels like a boring reinterpretation of Rembrandt's painting. So again, and it's a lot of it is style too. It's a lot of it is the style of painting. So I wouldn't say it's plagiarism. Also because it's, you know, it's a self-portrait, but it's not Rembrandt specifically. So I would say inspiration, but also not very compelling at the same time.
Well, you know what's funny is the Cahun and Seville image we were looking at as a comparison. I really like each piece for different reasons. I mean, they're extremely different from each other, but I look at the Odd Nerdrum and I'm like, Odd Nerdrum, come on. I just look at it and I'm like, you're such a wannabe Rembrandt. Like, just don't do that. Go be your own person. And I have funny feelings about Odd Nerdrum because he's one of those artists who I think is so close to being really, really good. But there's something about him that rubs me the wrong way. And I wonder if it's because he's trying a little too hard to look like Rembrandt. And by doing that, you just fall on your face. Like, this painting on the left is not good. I mean, just look at the Nerdrum image. Do you think that's a good painting?
No. You know what it feels like to me? It feels like he did his best to copy it as much as possible. And then, like, the reaction that people give is like, who cares? It's not as good as the original. You know, that's, you know. So, yeah, I don't think it's a very good painting. It probably could be improved. I really think like he could easily go back into it, but it's just not. I don't even think it's worth it on some level. You're just not Rembrandt, bro. Sorry.
I mean, Odd Nerdrum is a very good painter. If you guys look him up, you will see he has really good technique. I mean, he understands lighting. He's very good at chiaroscuro and everything. But for me, it's too visible that he's just trying so hard. You just sort of feel bad for him. We have some thoughts about Rembrandt toothpaste. 10,000 Crows said, I feel like I heard of Rembrandt toothpaste before I knew about Rembrandt. So whenever I hear of him, I just think about toothpaste. But see, Jordan, do you ever wonder, like, okay, let's say you make it so big and like in 2 centuries, they're making like McCracken-Foster toothpaste. Like, how does that make you feel?
That would be awesome. Oh my goodness. That would be the coolest. As long as my family's taken care of by the name, then it'll be all right.
Moonbeam is saying the Rembrandt painting looks glowing. The other one just looks old and dead. Oh, poor Odd Nerdrum. We are just crapping on you so badly today. And Seven Angelic says it looks like an underpainting. Okay, I sympathize, Valerie. I want to be Rembrandt. Who doesn't? Yeah, I do too. And Slepnir, thank you so much for your puns. We can always depend on you. Definitely a, quote, odd painter. Emily says, it feels like he tried to copy Rembrandt, even down to the use of lighting, but he didn't have the skill in this piece. I would say in general, he doesn't have the skill.
To me, the lighting is what makes Rembrandt's portrait so alive. And he just doesn't get that at all in his own piece. That's like the key thing. It's like the one thing he really probably should have taken from Rembrandt he didn't use. So
no, the lighting is bad. It's like really washed out and the colors are not vibrant at all. Tell us in the chat if you guys have ever seen a Rembrandt painting in person. I saw a whole bunch when I was at the Metropolitan in New York. They always say, oh, it's not as good as this is like, it's a different artwork. You just, oh my God, it's like glowing in front of you. You feel like there's a light behind the canvas. Have you seen a real Rembrandt painting?
I can't remember, to be honest. I know I went to the Art Museum in Boston, and John Singer Sargent kind of took all my attention that day. So I don't even remember if I saw Rembrandt, if he's even in there.
By the way, you guys, if you would like to hear more about plagiarism, me and Kat, we spilled some hot tea the other day. So you might want to check out some of our personal experiences with plagiarism. And then Jordan and Lauren and I also did this one where, again, we examined different versions of plagiarism. Some cases had actual lawsuits and stuff. So take a look at that. Our Prof has a podcast. It's available on Spotify and also on iTunes. Jordan and I will be hanging out in the Art Prof Discord. We will be in the post live streams channel. So we hope you will hang out with us and talk about Rembrandt toothpaste and crap on Odd Nerdrum some more. Poor guy. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel and join the Art Prof family. And thank you to our top Patreon supporters for helping us keep doing what we're doing, which is to create free art content for everybody to access. Thank you to all of you guys for the great comments and questions. Thank you so much for watching. We'll see you next time. Bye.